Oh, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap, brought to you by CrowCast, of course, and proudly sponsored by Smith Partners Real Estate, down-to-earth electrical, with a helping hand from Hardware Unboxed, and also all our wonderful patrons on Patreon. Joining me tonight, Nikki. How you going, Nick?
I'm going very well.
Good to hear. And Macca, how you doing, mate?
Oh, I think I'll be about as cheery as every other Crows reporter.
You know, you look back at the last few casts and people giving us shit about being negative and you're giving Brad Crouch a hard time and blah, 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 blah. Well, you know, we play a song in front of the news on Tuesday Night Live, and I think it's called Hate to Say I Told You So.
No, it is unfortunately sad, isn't it, that you and I were a bit negative about our Gold Coast win, and in particular about the midfield area and the ease at which sometimes that ball was moved forward from the midfield. And that negativity actually carried on in practice into this game, didn't it?
Well, it kind of did. And also, of course, welcome to everyone who's joined us on Spreaker for the chat. It'll be very interesting to see what sort of live listens we get this week, considering the mess that we're in. But why don't we just push on and have a look at the scores, shall we?
I'll just say that Brent in the Spreaker chat has said, welcome to episode 18 of Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Well, interesting weekend again in footy, notwithstanding our disaster, but some funny results and some unfavourable results as well. Did you guys see much of the footy over the weekend?
Just about everyone, yep.
Very good.
Mostly only the Sunday ones for me.
All right. Well, let's hook right into it then, and ignoring Friday night for a moment. Saturday, we had Richmond taking care of the Power, Richmond 15-11-101 to the Power 9-9-63. Fairly predictable result, and Richmond really starting to wind up now for finals.
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate description of it, Fiend, because they were far too good for Port Adelaide. That was one of the highlights of my weekend, because on Facebook on Friday night, there's some alleged friends who were rubbishing shit out of the Crows, and they are Port supporters. And isn't karma a wonderful thing? Because the very next day they got theirs. And but in terms of the football, the quality of football, Richmond use that handball ahead type technique all the time, so which forces players to run. They don't handball to static players, and they have the ability to carve a team right up once they get that going. And they were far too good for Port. Port tried very hard. I don't think anybody could say they didn't try hard, but Richmond far too good.
Yeah.
So basically, they're a team full of netballers. Richmond are.
Well, that's
the way you play netball. You should be passing forward and to somebody who's always moving. You never pass to somebody standing still.
If that's the case, Nicky, you could call them that then.
Yeah. And it works for them because, like you said, Mac, it gets them running, and also it's very hard to defend when the ball's cutting diagonally in front of you all the time. Now, Carlton, oh dear, our pick's looking shaky, and getting over the Suns, it wasn't terribly convincing, only 4 goals in the end, but 15 goals, 9.99 to 11 goals, 9.75.
Yeah, I didn't watch that game. Sadly, 24 points, that's all you have to do, Fiend, to win the game, and that's what they got.
Yeah.
And as the result of the weekend, they're now another position higher.
Yep.
I'm looking forward. I don't think they'll get any higher, but I don't think they'll get any lower either.
I think they might get a bit higher.
Well,
we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, okay. But in terms of that game, no, I've got nothing to contribute other than the fact that I think everybody would have thought Carlton would beat Gold Coast. And Gold Coast shouldn't be in the comp. That's my opinion.
Yep, and a fair enough opinion as well, Mac. I wouldn't disagree with it. Now, what was next? Oh, God. What was next?
GWS Collingwood.
Yes, and GWS bouncing. Collingwood aren't all that healthy at the moment. GWS 19-8, 122, a very convincing 47-point win over Collingwood 11-9-75.
It was an absolute bottle of a game to watch, quite frankly. Some very, very good football in it, and you have to take your hat off to GWS. It does show how much talent this team actually has. When you take out of a midfield, Callum Ward, he hasn't been available virtually all year. You've got Kelly, Caniglio gone. They were out injured, and yet I thought their midfield performed beautifully. They brought up Zach Williams into the midfield, who plays a very dashing game normally from the back pocket or the half-back flank, and he's probably one of the very best players on the ground.
Got a bit of time for Zach Williams. He's a good player.
Quality player, and their forward line was basically intact, and they were just too good for Collingwood, just too good.
Yeah.
And Collingwood tried very hard, but I think Collingwood go too much to the flanks rather than direct, and they therefore gets themselves into a little bit of bother.
Yeah, I thought Collingwood were a chance to actually get them in this game, so I tipped them just with all those really key midfielders they were out.
I think we all did.
But
we all did.
Yeah, it's like, and I was watching the scores come on whilst I was driving to my footy game, and I'm just like, really, bastards.
Yeah, and one thing I should mention about that game too, Grundy, one of the most outstanding ruck games I've seen. He got 181 Dream Team points to give you some idea of how well he went.
In a losing team.
In a losing team. So he is very, very, very good. And it's an interesting thing whether we do pursue him or not.
Yes. Well, if he says he wants to come home, Macca, and he says he wants to come to your club, like, do you turn a bloke? That's like Geelong saying no to Patrick Dangerfield, just about.
Yep. I think you summed it up very well.
So, anyway, we'll see how that pans out. Brisbane Lions continue their impressive way. They were challenged by North, and there was some controversy at the end. The umpires admitting, or the AFL... I don't like the AFL coming out after the game and saying, oh, yeah, we actually got that one wrong. I mean, it's too late now, gentlemen. How about getting it right?
Well, if they were to do that... If they were to come out and admit everything they got wrong, they'd be talking all bloody night.
That's right. Hang on.
But this particular one was very...
Yeah, sorry. No, go on.
I was just going to say that was a very key decision in the game, by the way, that particular decision.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, just... The whole thing just frustrates me. Brisbane 12-15-87 to North 12-3-75. Margin in the end of 12 points, but it could have been a lot different. But Brisbane marching along, Macca.
They are very good. They are very good. And it's an interesting thing, the mixture that they've done, how they've created it, you know, with Noble at the helm and Fagan as the coach and Hodgie as the senior player on the field and... pinch a couple of midfielders from here and there, and they've good midfielders. One of them used to play for us once, and he was regarded as not good enough, best player on the ground.
Well, we have to talk about that. We have to talk about Jared Lyons because he wasn't just a solid player. As you said, he was best on ground. We've given away a kid. We undervalued a kid who is now best on ground, and we likely undervalued him because he's not the quickest midfielder going around.
Correct.
But considering we now are running the slowest midfield in the competition...
Yes.
It's true. So then you line up, all right, so Brad Crouch versus Jared Lyons, who's got the better kick? Who's got the better delivery into the forward 50? You know, who's got the higher disposal efficiency? Who runs better defensively? Like, it's not even a contest. And we wouldn't pay this guy $200,000 a year.
But you can't compare him to Brad and Brad's problems because Brad is actually supposed to be our outside speed and class. And if he was in the same midfield with Brad, who was performing at the level of a Lachie Neale or those other midfielders that he had around him at the Gold Coast, that's why Lyons is able to play so well in the midfield. It's not the one player, it's a number of them. So for me, it's Lyons or Ellis Yeoman, and that's what it came down to at the time when we were tossing up between those two. We went with keeping Ellis Yeoman and not Lyons.
I don't think it was Ellis Yeoman. I think it was Matt Crouch, Nicky, because Matt Crouch was our inside mid at that stage.
Correct.
It wasn't.
CEY
was rookied. Remember?
He was, but But he was the one. So we offered a contract to Lions, but it was a low ball contract.
150 grand
We
a
offered
year.
a low ball contract. We offered a low ball contract to Ellis Yeoman to put him on the rookie list, and he accepted that opportunity. Whereas Lions said, "No, I wanted more,"
Yeah,
and went elsewhere.
And we know how.
So it was seeing which two took it.
No, but the point is though, Nikki, that we've given away a midfielder who we undervalued severely. We also undervalued Ellis Yeoman, but a bit more understandable because of his knee issues and his form line, etc., etc. But Jared Lyons was performing exceptionally well in the year that he was traded out. Exceptionally well. And we decided to piss him off. And here we are. We haven't got a midfielder who has any inclination to run both ways and can't kick. And Jared Lyons is going to play in a bloody final series for Brisbane.
Sitting second, by the way, now, Brisbane.
Yep. And anyway, let's move on. The Dockers 7-10-52 getting up over the Sydney Swans by a point, 7-9-51, ending Sydney's chances of the finals, you would think.
Yes, well, the timing of the games enabled me to see the balance of this game, and in particular, Freo's come from behind to get on top of Sydney and win. And again, no Nat Fyfe, and I think they had a couple of other players out as well. I just couldn't believe with a pretty ordinary side that they managed to beat Sydney, even though it was at home. And Sydney were travelling like winners when I started to watch it, but perhaps that was the curse. Because after that, Freo took over the game and got up to beat them quite narrowly in the end. You can't get it much more narrowly than that, can you? Nope. But it was, it was a good game to watch, but it was like watching a couple of scrubbers fight it out, really. They were scrubbers.
Yeah, pretty much. You can't see the Dockers making the 8 this year, irrespective of the
and basically Sydney are our next problem. We need Sydney to win another game to hold Carlton back a bit.
Oh, that's not going to happen. Look, today we had the Hawthorn getting up over Geelong. How does that work? 12 goals, 13.85 to 8 goals, 13.61. A margin there of 24 points.
Game.
It's a Hawthorn. It's a bit like the showdown. It doesn't matter what the form line is. It's always a good match.
Well, they've got Clarkson, of course. And look, I thought he coached beautifully today, the way he structured up his team against Geelong. Geelong, they like to do the run and carry bit of themselves. And the way that he structured up his defence and his press once the ball was in their forward line, etc., he made it very, very difficult for Geelong. And they played very, very well. Don't get me wrong, they played extremely well. But I think Clarkson's guidance with the way he structured up his team, Geelong just couldn't get through that defence very easily at all, and hence the reason why Hawthorn got home. And then, interestingly enough, another ex-Crows player there on the wing, Henderson, played a very, very good game once again.
But very interesting to come out of that game is that Geelong actually have had the worst goal conversion after the bye. Up until the bye, they were the best by quite a margin. Now they're really struggling to kick goals, and they had so many easy set shots, and we're missing them in that. It was a third quarter, Macca?
Very good point, Nikki. They missed about 5 in a row, 5 on the trot, I think. And
some of those were absolutely shocking misses.
Well, they were crow-like misses. I think that'd be the best way to describe them, crow-like misses. Ones you should naturally kick, but they didn't.
We also had West Coast getting up eventually over Melbourne. West Coast 14 goals, 7.91 to Melbourne 11-12-78. In it for a long time. Eagles by 13 in the end.
Brave Melbourne. They actually led the game most of the game, and they even up to three-quarter time. But West Coast just ran over them really in the last quarter when their class told. But Melbourne will probably win another game or two before the end of the season. I think they're just starting to get a little bit of form together and a little bit of good football together as well. Oliver was absolutely outstanding in this game, absolutely outstanding. He nearly owned the ball. He had it that often. And West Coast, it looked pretty sluggish early. But I liked the game being played at Alice Spring. It was set in the natural surroundings with the mountains or the cliffs or whatever they are in the background, and with all the crowd and the heaps and heaps of Indigenous players there cheering their boys on. I just thought, it had a bit of atmosphere about the game as well.
Melbourne have got a problem. Next week they've got St Kilda, then they've got Richmond, Collingwood and Sydney.
Maybe they won't win another game.
St Kilda had their dead cat bounce today,
bounce back.
Thanks for the segue.
The dead cat bounce, yeah.
So it's the Saints, under caretaker coach Brett Ratton, 17-14, 116 to the Bulldogs, 14 goals, 589. And it's happened often enough this year now that it has to be a trend. It'd be a fascinating psychological study, because there's nothing that a caretaker coach can do in such a short space of time to get a team to play well. So it has to be in players' heads somehow.
Well, and to me, it's an indictment on players.
Well, it is.
If that ability to play that way was there, and if nothing as much is really being changed in terms of the coaching structures or etc. so much, there's not too much difference between it, then why wasn't it being done before? Does it purely come down to motivation?
It's a very good point, because Jack Billings was interviewed after the game and asked what Ratton had done differently. He said nothing. He just told us to get out there and play.
Yeah. I don't know whether it's I don't know whether it's one of those things where it's not that they lack motivation to play, Nick, but when a new coach comes in, there's no longer a sense of, no, I don't think it's like that. I think it's got to do with expectation, I think. But I'd love to do a study on it, because it's fascinating to me. Anyway, we won't do a study on it.
Just one little point, though. They were theorising that perhaps one of the reasons for that is that during the course of the whole year, they get a lot closer to the assistant coaches than they do to the main coach.
I don't think it's that either.
Well, no, I'm just saying this is one of the theories they put up, and therefore they'll listen to their message a lot more clearly than they would the senior coach.
Maybe. I think
for what it's worth.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's go to the ladder, and it sees the Cats now only a game clear on top on 13 wins. The bloody Brisbane Lions now up to second, as you mentioned earlier, along with West Coast on 48 points, 12 wins. Nice percentage. Won their last 5. They come up against Hawthorn next week, which you would think is a winnable game. I mean, geez, what a season. What a season from Brisbane so far.
Great. Absolutely great.
Yeah. It'll be a very interesting game, that Hawthorn game. It's down at UTAS, so that's probably the leveller. Collingwood slipping, whereas Richmond also on 44 points going the other way, so you would expect that they might swap over the next couple of weeks, and they play each other next week, so that'll probably decide that one. That'll be a bit of a blockbuster, you would think. GWS and now Essendon in the spot we should have been in with 40 points. Adelaide Crows alone on 36 points, and our percentage dropping. I hadn't realised it, but did you notice the stat that they put up about our percentage during that game?
No.
We were something like 96 point something percent against everyone else, and 240 something percent against Gold Coast, because we played them twice. So the only reason our percentage is up above 100. Yeah, the only reason our percentage is up above 100 is because we played Gold Coast twice.
That's an indictment. Absolute indictment.
96, I think it was, apart from that. Port out of the 8, along with Hawthorn, Fremantle, Western Bulldogs, all on 32 points and putting pressure on us. None of them with fantastic percentage, but all with winnable games next week. And then we drop down to North on 28 points, along with St Kilda. Then we've got Sydney on 24 points. Carlton on 20 points, but 10 percentage points behind them. The one we probably want to keep winning is St Kilda, I reckon, because their percentage is pretty shit. But they are 2 games clear. So And that destiny is in our hands next week, obviously, because we play Carlton. And then Melbourne also on 20 points, but with a terrible percentage of 80.6. And then the Suns not doing us any favours at all. That's the ladder. That's the results.
Yes.
It's as I think it was Ben Davison in the chats pointed out, we're 2 wins away from being in the top 4, and we don't deserve to be in the top 4, even if we win 2 of those games.
Yeah.
It actually says a lot of how even this season is, but I think there is I agree with Ben, there's a real drop-off in quality.
There's a massive drop-off.
And look, that's the 2 games off being the top 4 is flattering to us because of the fact that, I mean, if any side that can be comfortably leading a game 3 or 4 times, so it's not an event, it's a trend, and then just absolutely fold like a bloody concertina, doesn't deserve to play finals at all.
Anyway, why don't we smack straight into the Adelaide game, shall we? Because there's lots to talk about. And it seems to be a bit of a usual occurrence. Up by, I don't know, 5 goals, half-time or halfway through the second quarter, and we end up losing convincingly. And it's happened once again with Adelaide going down to Essendon by, how much was it in the end? I've lost my little page here for a second.
21 points.
Oh, what's going on?
Yeah,
yes, it was
points.
21 points, 96 to 75. Essendon getting up on the back of they kicked 10 goals, 3 in the second half, and we kicked 3 goals, 5. So fair turnaround after being 7-10 to 5-3 at half time. Initial thoughts?
Well, I've been trying to work it out, and it's because this has happened now. And even if you include the Gold Coast, we were outscored in the second half against the Gold Coast.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a look at, there's 3 factors come into this. Either our game plan demands too much of us and it's not sustainable physically, or the players aren't doing what the coaches want them to do, or the coaches are being absolutely outplayed during the game when other teams alter their game style. Now, that definitely is a factor in the game. That when a team starts charging at us with handball and cutting their way through the centre, there was no way Geelong to do that to Hawthorn today, but so our structure is obviously not right. So I think it's a combination, and how much desperation is in this group of players at times, or is it physically not sustainable? I have no answers, Fiend, because it's going to be in that mix, and I don't know which one it is.
I kind of have an answer, Macca, because what were we like before the bye? The game style we were playing was that very shutdown, grind teams down and run over the top of them. And, okay, we might have got out, they came back, and then we were actually showing a really strong mental capacity to come back in the game and grind out a win. And earlier in the season, we were actually talking about that was actually quite good. It was that kind of style, and that pressure game is going to win you. Now, after the bye, that game style has completely disappeared. Why? Who is the one player we have not had in the team since the bye? Cam Ellis-Yolman. To me, it shows exactly how much he has brought to this team. And it shouldn't just be that one player. But to me, that's the glaring change of a completely different game style that there seems to be from before the bye and after the bye.
How do you think that's impacted, Nick? And I'm not disagreeing with you because, I mean, it stands out like a sore thumb. But how has it impacted?
That contested ball and that body and that pressure that he applies, the ability that he's got with his size, that he can do that reach. So whilst he's not the quickest because of his size, and we've seen him do that with those little hands in and out, which kind of just stops that break. And even if it pulls it back to a contest again, or he's able to then get the ball and dish it out. and create his space that he needs to make a good decision. Whereas we've got the players that we consider the A-grade players and the stars in Brad and Matt Crouch, Rory Sloane. I would leave Rory in there, but the other two I think are expendable.
I wouldn't go that far.
And I wouldn't really want to say that about Matt, but definitely I think Brad. I think he's a liability in our midfield.
Welcome to the club, Nikki.
Well,
how many weeks have I been saying about Brad?
Mm.
Well, I still won't join.
I've been in the club a while.
No, it's not. It's not as simple as that. It just is not that simple. Nikki, I mean, with all due respect, Cam Yeoman's absence has made a big difference because there isn't that big body in there, not only going for the ball, but also protecting as well and all the rest of it goes with it. But Cam Yeoman and God combined couldn't have stopped the way that the team's carved through us in the last few weeks.
Yeah, but why is it, Macca? Why is it? And I think it's balance of midfield. You're looking at Ellis Yeoman's physical capabilities, and yes, that does have an impact not having his big body in there and all the rest of it. But what it also means is that we're playing blokes in there that would otherwise be somewhere else. And what surprised me the most is that we haven't just used Huey Greenwood as that big-bodied midfielder in a like-for-like situation. We've actually sacrificed a bit of Matt, a bit of Brad, a bit of Sloane as those inside players. And then I wonder whether Brad is fit enough to work inside for periods of time and then also, work effectively defensively. Because he certainly doesn't seem committed to work defensively. But Pike said something during his presser, which I thought his presser was terribly underwhelming. But one thing he mentioned, and it wasn't really picked up, was he mentioned capacity, Macca. And I just wonder whether that was a slight dig to our fitness levels.
It could have been. And I wonder what he really meant by that, actually, the word capacity. Because you could interpret many ways. That may have been one of the interpretations of it. But we talking about the midfield here. I thought our trouble started a lot further back than that in our forward line because of the fact that they had speedsters coming out of there. There's Sard, Connor McKenna, Redmond. They kept streaming out of there, and they're the boys that really got it cutting through there. And midfields can't stop it. Not when the forwards have allowed them to get away so easily. You are that one man behind. Can I finish, please, Nicky? You're that one person behind all the time.
Yeah, just get that overlap.
Because the person in front has to come up. That leaves the next one, and so on. And that's how we get caught time after time. And if you listen to what the coach said, of their was it 15 goals they got? It was 15. 12 of them came from our forward line.
Yeah, but you know what? That was actually a lie. I've looked at the stats. No.
His statement.
It was a lie because it was actually about 6 that came from rebound 50s, not 12.
Look, I can't answer that, Fiend, because of the fact I'm just quoting what he said. But
I know.
Visually, there was a lot of it. And again, when we played Port Adelaide, again, there was a lot of that just come flying from the back from our forward line. We don't have the defensive pressure inside our forward line that we are supposed to have.
I don't think it's defensive pressure, Macca. Go on, Nikki.
No, it's not defensive pressure. Because I was at the game. So what they're doing is okay. Is
good on you.
No,
because Nikki was at the game. There was a ton of defensive pressure.
No, there wasn't.
She was applying it. Sorry, I'm just... Go on, Nick. Have a say.
No, because... And I was really... trying to... I was seeing what we were doing because they were very consciously getting about 3 or 4 extra players back there. So that's sucking up our defence and it's sucking up our midfielders. In order to get that overlap run, they are making sure that they get that outnumber in the forward line. Our midfielders were then staying out to try and create some space for our forwards. But, of course, there's 3 to 4 extra defenders sitting in there. Once they managed to get the ball and what they were trying to do and what it worked well after halftime, but we were stopping them trying to get that overlap run, because this is basically Essendon play like Richmond do, which is they get those extra defenders back and then they get that chaos run forward, which makes it harder to pick players up. They'll also work very hard to get an opposition player down on the ground, out of the play, so they've particularly one of the midfielders, so that they definitely have got an extra player. So there's no way you can cover that overlap run. Our defence was pushing up too high because of that, which we were doing at the start of the year. We then corrected it when we got on that good run towards the middle of the year before the bye. That's how they do it. It's very simple. We got sucked into it. We controlled them quite well and stopped them getting that overlap early on, but the midfield slacked off, particularly the one who was really integral to them doing it and the work he was doing around that space and creating it was Merritt. And who's his direct opponent? Atkins.
Well,
yeah, but that's the wrong play. And can I just add something to that, Nick?
Yeah.
I don't disagree with much that you're saying, but there is another ingredient in that whole, bounce out of our forward line. It's the manner in which the ball goes into our forward line.
Yes.
So
correct.
Our forward entries are very shallow and they're often wide. So you don't actually have the ability, like you picture it, someone's running a diagonal from the goal square out to the flank. And the ball is kicked on a diagonal, so the ball's basically heading towards the boundary line. Our forward is heading towards the boundary line trying to mark it. There's not a lot of ability to cover that, so it often will go out of bounds, and then you get a reset with a throw in, or it gets missed, and there's not the volume of players around the contest to shut it down. Our forward entries are far too shallow, they're far too wide, and when you get a bloke like Tommy Lynch, he had, I think from memory, because I looked this up, he had 12 second half disposals, Macca. 5 of them were effective, and 4 were direct turnovers. Now,
I was actually going to nominate that.
He is a bloke that is one that will feed into our forward 50, but he never kicks long into our forward 50. He tries to chisel out those passes, which is fine if you're hitting targets. You chisel out a pass and then Tex can miss it from 50. But because he was missing, where's it going? It's going to the opposition, and that's where you get that run. So yes, I don't believe our midfield are defensively running defensively very well, but I've also noticed that our forward entries are not set up to retain field position, which Don likes to call it. And as a consequence, as you mentioned, Nicky, because our defence is so high, we're then vulnerable because the ball is all of a sudden back into the midfield, before anyone's had a chance to blink. So a couple of things there, and we've noticed all year that the connection between the midfield and the forward 50 is out, and I think it's an indictment on the fact that we don't have a natural marking forward. That's what it comes down to.
100%. 100% thing. That's exactly where I was going to, because of the fact that one of the reasons the ball comes out of our forward line so easily is because the other teams. Every other team has got somebody who can clunk a ball now and again. We don't.
Not only that, Mac, Tex doesn't even make the contest half the time. He doesn't even get hands on it half the time. I know that Tex got ignored a lot, and he has been ignored a lot, and people who point that out have got a point. But I think our players have actually lost confidence in Tex. Because when he is in a contested situation, he's nowhere bloody near it. Nowhere near it. And it's an indictment on him if they've lost confidence to the extent that they don't want to kick it to him unless he's basically on a burst lead out in front.
Yeah, and once the ball does, and as you said quite right, we don't have anybody that can take a contested mark. So the ball is actually then either going to be marked by them or it's going to come down to the ground. Once the ball hits the ground, who's our damaging player? If it's not Eddie Betts, there's nobody else. There just is nobody else.
No, well, we had a bloke and we dropped him after one game.
Yep.
One game, we dropped him. It's the second time this year we've done it to a kid. And if you count the way we've handled Chase Jones since he unfortunately got concussed, three kids we've done it to this year. Miles Paholke can't get more than a game, although he's injured at the moment. Like it's, Well, you can't get me started because we aren't talking about it, but it grinds my gears. It really does. But
you'd have to be very, very stupid to think that forward setup is going to win a flag. So why do we persevere with that forward setup? Jenkins, I thought Jenkins, he had a couple of moments where he competed, but there were a lot of moments that he didn't. Walker, the same applies there. Lynch, as you said, quite correctly said, his delivery, he was trying to do these cute little passes all the time, and he found the opposition more than he found us. I thought that, what's the other little whippersnapper on
Murphy.
The half? Murphy, yeah. He plays up so high. He's so high. He's nowhere near down near where he plays. The ball.
He plays too high because he actually takes himself out of the contest. And if he's supposed to be our forward 50 pressure, and yet he's the bloke that is up so high is delivering it into forward 50, then I haven't been in favour of Lockie being in the team for maybe the last 3 or 4 weeks. Because I've felt like he's, as I've said a couple of times, looked really busy doing not much at all. And I think it's shown again on the weekend that he didn't provide enough forward 50 pressure to justify his presence in the team, in my opinion.
I think he goes hard enough when he's near the ball, but he's not in the right spot.
Macca, one fucking tackle.
Well, yes.
He's our defensive forward. He's our defensive forward. No one questions his endeavour, but whether he's been told to play in the wrong way or whether he's just playing the wrong way, he doesn't apply enough pressure. And the other one is bloody Riley Knight. Now, Riley Knight was put in the team for defensive pressure. 3 tackles.
Yep.
Why wasn't he used on one of their frickin' runners? Honestly, why else is Riley Knight in the team?
Should have been on tagging Merritt all day. That's where he should have been.
Yep.
Sitting in Merritt. Merritt is the best. Actually, Merritt is when you look at pure football ability, Merritt is the best player on the ground by 100%.
Yep.
And we allowed him to run around like an unregistered dog.
Yep.
Whereas, again, Dylan Clark, who's a superb tagger, he kept Sloaney, who tried his guts out, but he kept him down to 20 possessions, and not too many of those were overly effective either. So they tagged our person who's capable of winning a game for us, whereas we just let theirs run around like an unregistered dog, and he played an excellent game. And so the coaching staff, they've got to take the rap for it. They have to.
Oh, well, I guess so, Macca, because... but I do think players have to take responsibility for their own form.
Of course they do. But then again, sometimes you're in a position that you don't have a structure that can win, and also you don't have a structure that can stop the opposition. And I think both of those applied in this particular game. Before the game, I looked at our personnel. I didn't look at the way the game would be played, and that's quite stupid of me, but I looked at just the personnel. Because if you look at our personnel line by line, on paper, it looks good. And I looked at their personnel line by line, and I thought, well, they've got a few out. There's a couple in there that are a bit dubious. We should have the upper hand. And I was very confident we would win the game because I didn't take into account what's inside the body, the heart. I didn't take into account the brain trusts behind each of these teams. And, it's as Ben Davison quite right said, it's a combination of coaching and players. And we've got players who are on the tail end of their career because we were the oldest team out on the park out of the 18 teams this week. And we've got so many players that towards the end of their careers. And we've got players that should be starting to learn the game, sitting in the twos. And it's a team that can win some games, but it's just not going to win enough.
Well, some telling stats, and we will get into the head-to-heads, but I will make a couple of comments because it seemed to me that Don was blaming largely forward pressure, as we've just discussed, for
there was none
for the loss, and that's all well and good. But for the third week in a row, the telling stat is contested possession. We were up for all of the first half in the contested possession differential. By the end of the third quarter, we'd gone from about plus 10 to about minus 10 or thereabouts. And we continued on around about that rate, minus 10. And the score differential follows that stat 100%. Okay? Now, that's the same
as it always will, yeah.
Well, that's what happened. Well, not always, because, see, the other stat that has been hurting us is uncontested possession. So it's been a real indicator that when we haven't been able to play our game on our terms by having a lot of the ball and a bit more uncontested possession, that's when the score has dropped off. The uncontested possession in this game, we maintained a positive differential quite easily throughout the course of the match. The trouble is we just weren't getting enough of it because we weren't getting enough of it in the coalface, and Essendon was so efficient with their ball use that they were having their conversion rate per disposal was, or their disposals per shot or whatever, was quite good. So their ball use was very efficient, and when we did get the ball in a contested situation, we tended to use it inefficiently with a lot of overuse of handball and handball to flat-footed people, etc., etc. So a lot of cheap stats in that uncontested possession. But, you know, you can say it's forward pressure all you like, but at the end of the day, if your midfield are not getting the agate at the coalface, and our clearance work was fine. So when the ball was stationary, Macca, and our blokes are around it, they're good, and we know that of blokes like Brad and Matt. But when the ball is in the field of play and they have to work hard and win a contest, they're not so good. And that's the stat that dropped off in the second half. And then the other stat, sorry, Matt, just to finish off, the other stat that correlated with that is, and which is why I wondered about fitness, is the turnover differential. Our turnover differential went from pretty much parity to about plus 10. So our contested possession dropped off, our uncontested possession maintained, but the turnovers increased.
Yeah, well, look,
so there you go.
Yeah, well, I was listening to Jimmy Bartell on the radio, on the telly this morning, and they were doing the Channel 7 review of our game. Bartell, I'll tell you, he's a genius. He talked about every game that had been played so far, and when he analyses, he has the ability to reach deep inside of a game and just see it. And he went straight to our midfield, and he did the structure of our midfield, which I've been saying is wrong all the time. And he said that if you look at Adelaide's midfield, there's some very good players in there, and they're all diving in to get the ball. And then when they get it, they've usually got to hurry it. They do a wild handball or hurry it out there rather than giving it to a player. On the other hand, he said how you should be set up is how Essendon had Merritt sitting back on the outside, and then if they do get possession of the ball, shoot it out to him, and then you get a quality delivery going forward. And that's what we've been saying about them week after week after week. This is, as he said, the way you should set up is your midfield should be a circle. It should be a circle, so that whichever way the ball goes, you've got maybe one or two go in, and the rest are waiting for the ball to come out.
Yeah, Fox Footy highlighted some of our midfield or our stoppage setups as well, Mac, and it was very much the same. They highlighted the fact that our outside runners were too close to the contest, and therefore ineffective. Too many of our blokes going in. You know, we've said for quite a while that we get sucked into the ball too much, and that's because our midfield is full of natural ball winners. You know, Matt, Brad, Huey, CY, they're all natural ball hunters, so that's their game. And that's where I'm saying that it's the balance is all wrong. We're expecting Brad to be something that he's not, in my opinion. He could be a very good inside midfielder because he has got a little bit of ability to burst, but he's not clean enough and silky enough to be that outside distributor. You have a look at the difference between Brad and Dylan Shield on Friday night. Wouldn't you love to have Dylan Shield in our midfield just for a little bit of silk on the outside?
That's speed. Speed. And you're just watching him go, and people around us are yelling, "Oh, chase him, chase him!" And it's like we don't have anybody on our list who can go with him. He's that fast, and it was beautiful to watch from a football purity point of view, but from an opposition point of view, you wanted to, somebody take him out.
Yeah. So it's balance, I think, Mac. I think it's balanced. Anyway, look, let's go through some head-to-heads and see what we can find. Disposals, 424 to 405. Nothing wrong with our ability to get the ball. Our kick-to-handball ratio was, okay-ish. 242 kicks to 182 handballs.
Reasonable.
Yeah, it took enough marks to suggest that we had plenty of uncontested ball, which the stats show out. 49 tackles, which was the other criticism of the night, I guess, is that the fact that we just could not stick a tackle. They were breaking through our tackles, something shocking. They had 66
tackle with their hands and not their arms.
Yep. And that's because they're doing us for pace, Mac. If you aren't quick enough to get yourself into the right position to lay a proper body tackle, it's because they've done you for pace. And you're reaching. Hit-outs, Rolly O'Brien did really well, 44 to 26. I thought he played well.
I would actually have Riley as our best on ground.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, I thought... Yeah, we'll get to that. Clearances, we did, as I said, we did really well, 50 to 28, which would normally be enough to win you the game. And again, it should be a big red light flashing in the coach's box to say, hey, we're smashing clearances and losing. Where else? What else is going on? What else is going on that this is happening? And then you have a look at our contested possessions, and we lose it by 11. Our disposal efficiency looked good, but what doesn't happen is that people look at those stats and they go, well, what's the actual number? But then you've got to have a look at it more closely, and most of those stats dropped off in the second half. So it was, we were a fair way in front in the first half statistically as well as the scoreboard. We were winning all of these. Like even the clearances, if you have a look at the second half, sorry, I'll just bring that up. So clearances in the second half, we absolutely smashed it. 15, plus 15 at half time, we ended up plus 23, thereabouts. So we continue to win the clearances, and yet our contested possession stat goes down the toilet. Doesn't that ring a bell, Macca?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you ever saw, if I only gave you one stat for the game and said we killed him in the clearances with those numbers, you'd say, how much did we win by?
Yeah, exactly.
But unfortunately, the rest of it was no good.
But then when you have a look at uncontested possessions throughout the third quarter, right? So at the start of the third quarter, we were plus 48 uncontested possessions, right? By the by the start of the last quarter, we were plus 21. So in the third quarter, we lost uncontested possession by, 27, which means that what they did was dried us up on the outside. So even though we continue to win clearances, we lost contested possession and we lost uncontested possession in that third quarter, like substantially. That level of differential in one quarter of football. And that dropped off a cliff very quickly. By about 10 to 12 minutes into the third quarter, we were down to plus 25 from, as I said, plus 48. So we were down 23 already within 12, 13 minutes of the third quarter. Now, someone in that fucking coach's box needs to be looking at these stats because they're clear indicators that something's going wrong, as well as what you're seeing going on with your own eyes. These sort of things should be buzzing in front of people, and they're not.
Yeah, well, as you know, you'd have to be a great optimist to say that we have a good coaching team. We've had Campo now for some years, and Campo had his moments, but he's also been criticised for various things in the past. Ben Hart, no good at all. I mean, the forward line structure is a joke. There's no structure. It's a joke. Midfield, Godden, we talk about the way we're set up in the midfield, that we're not set up correctly, so that's not a tick. And the only one that gets a tick is Matt in the back lines, because the back lines, poor bastards, they've got this wave coming at them time after time, to the point where they end up arguing against amongst themselves, as we saw a couple of times, because it just keeps on coming and coming and coming. They'll kick it out and come back again because of the problems further up the field. And our overall plan, well, Don Pike's got to take the rap for that. So,
no, I don't believe that's the case. And Sil makes a very good point in the chat. Scott Camporelli has been promoted as senior assistant. He is in charge of our match day strategy, Macca.
yeah.
And I've had a gutful of Scott Campo in our coach's box. I'm sure there's blame to be apportioned in other ways, but remember, Scott Camporelli used to be in charge of our midfield when it was putrid, right? Now he's in charge of our match day strategy, and it's putrid. So he really needs to be marched on. He is no good. He is no good, and he's a blight on our football club. Pardon the pun. He served us well when Walshy went down, and we appreciate that and all the rest of it. But he's been in our coach's box for far too long for no result. He's survived 4 coaches. He's remained in our coach's box through when 4 senior coaches have dropped off. I defy you to find another senior assistant at any other club who has not only lasted 10 years but also outlasted 4 coaches.
It's a very, very good start. I hadn't even thought of it, Pete. No, you don't have to convince me. I'd like to see him go. I made that point. The only one I would keep, and you're probably right, Pike may not have the team he wants, but apart from Pike, who there's a question mark in my mind, because at this stage we don't make the match or the moves in a match that should be made, in my opinion anyhow. There's only one coach worth keeping, and it's our defence coach, and I would just clean out the rest and go. And I don't care if we went over the salary cap and paid the
well, we're not going to. We're not going to do that.
No, but common sense says...
No, we're not going to do it. We won't do it.
No, you're not going to do it.
Well, why wouldn't you kick out Campo and get hold of Richardson, for example?
Oh, no reason, Macca, but we won't go over the luxury tax cap. Not to any substantial amount, anyway.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Not on purpose. But we shouldn't need to, because every other bloody team in the comp has got a decent coach's box, and they can afford to do it. As far as we're aware, there's only one team that's over the tax, and I think that's Collingwood. So other clubs can afford a decent coaching box. We've got 2 rookies, a bloke who's been there 100 years, and another bloke who's been there 100 years, and a bloke who can't get a job anywhere else. So, it's a shambles. And you think about it, Macca, if you walk into a workplace and you're a senior manager, for example, right, and you look around you and there's a couple of new blokes who haven't been there very long, and then there's this one guy. There's one guy that's been there, 10 years. He's the stalwart in that office, right? How much pull, how much leverage do you reckon that guy has in that workplace?
Yeah,
substantial. Substantial. Even if you're above him on the hierarchy, he's still got substantial pull.
Too much. Yes,
and that's what's happened with Camporelli. So he just needs to go. He just needs to go. And it's not even it's not even a criticism of Campo, although I don't think he's any good. It's just too long in the one environment.
Well, surely they'll get rid of Ben Hart this year. I mean, they did tell him to go away and look around for another job because he still had a year to go on his contract. They were hoping he would get picked up so they didn't have to pay the year's salary. And when he never got picked up, and obviously nobody is as dumb as us to appoint him. We got stuck with him, but surely he will be gone at the end of this year. Surely.
Well, you would think so. Matt makes a good point in the chat. It must be hard for some of our kids to respect the coaching panel when they see some of the selections. I mean, Eddie mentioned to Rashudo before the game that Tyson Stengel was pretty flat at not being selected, and I reckon he had every fucking right not to be flat. You know, he had every right to be flat because he did nothing wrong in his debut, and we gave Richie Douglas 4 of the most useless weeks in football. Stengel goes and kicks 3 goals. All right, they weren't. It was his debut, for Christ's sakes. He did nothing wrong. We need pace. We need someone who's a bit zippy around the goals. It obviously had a positive impact on Eddie. What do? Oh, we'll just drop him. Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, this is why we're being critical of people apart from players. Fagan surely has to cop it in the neck. He must cop it in the neck because we had the year 2018 was a year from hell for our club. We were the laughing stock of the competition, and then we had the dickhead come out on a Saturday afternoon and humiliate the club with that alleged explanation of what was going on, which he explained nothing and actually made fun of the media. Now, any manager worth his salt would have never let Burton be appointed in the first place, because that is the most senior football position in the football club, and we have a man sitting there who does not have the capabilities. He has no qualification for it, no background to do it, all those roles whatsoever. And Fagan has allowed that, and not only has he allowed it, after he has absolutely effed up, he's allowed him to keep his position. And I've heard that people who've queried him on it have been told everybody makes mistakes. Well, I'm sorry, there's hundreds of thousands of people who barrack for the Crows and want them to go well, and they have to put up with this absolute shite with a man at the top like Burton running it. And then we've got, as you mentioned, Campo, and we could go through Hart, we can go through other people. Fagan is the man who is the CEO, who reports to the board, and he should be making recommendations to the board for the removal. And as I said, Burton obviously stole my letterbox, that they should be making major changes, and it should come from Fagan, and he's the head of it. All we hear is excuses.
I'm not so sure it's Fagan, because I'm not sure that's how the club is actually structured internally, Macca.
They report to Fagan.
Well, no.
They do.
Brett Burton
report to the board.
Brett Burton reports to the football director. And who's that?
Well, that must have been changed, because it used to be that they used to report to the CEO.
That's what I'm saying. I think organisationally they probably still do report to the CEO in terms of expenditure and budgets and all that sort of stuff. But there's a dotted line report to the board level football director, and who's that?
Well, that's Mark Rashudo, and he's also responsible for half this mess as well.
Correct. It's Mark Rashudo. And Mark Rashudo sits on radio and sits on TV and talks tough and says, we're too slow, we're not bloody, we don't run, we don't do this, blah, 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 blah. But he's not held any of those blokes accountable. From Brett Burton down, he has not made any of those blokes accountable. And I'd like to say that with regards to that earlier comment about the luxury tax, we don't want to spend over the luxury cap, and yet we've got Brett Burton, who was in charge of our fitness. Then we've got Matt Haas, who's in charge of our fitness. We've also got Steve Saunders, who wouldn't come cheap. We have spent a buttload of money in that space for one good bloke, Steve Saunders, and then 2 blokes who came from a failed program at Brisbane. One who's still in charge of our fitness, and the other one who's in charge of our whole football department. So it's not a matter of whether we can afford it, it's where we're spending the money, Mac. Because Steve Saunders could probably run our whole fitness department without any problems at all. He doesn't need Matt Haas there. And Brett Burton, if he failed at being a fitness director, then how the hell did he get to GM footy ops? I don't know. So you're right in terms of selections, but I hold Mark Shudo far more accountable here than Andrew Fagan, because I think Andrew Fagan, his number one KPI is looking after the corporate side, and Rue's in charge of looking after the footy side.
But the other thing about why I lay it at Fagan's feet as well is because of the fact that they called for a review, and it was a review was obviously necessary to be done given the year that we had.
Macca, they didn't have a review.
But hang on, instead of getting an external review where you'll get honesty, Fagan did an internal review. My Godfather. We're going to examine ourselves and say how well we went. You're not going to get the right answers. You're not going to get the right answers. You're not going to get people voluntarily give up their jobs. It was not a proper review.
But what did Fag say, Nikki, when we raised that?
About which one?
About reviewing. Basically, he said that the club's always in review. We're always looking at, our performances and blah, 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 blah. And yes, they conducted a review.
They always, he actually said that every club is always doing it. And they're always doing internal and external reviews. The only time they announce they're doing it is when it's for PR.
Yeah.
Any AFL club, anytime they announce that they're doing a review, they're doing it for a PR reasoning. And is pretty much within this industry, they are always continually going through reviews. They're continually pulling in outside areas to look at particular areas of football departments, etc. They do it every year. They do it multiple times.
Nikki, we were told by Fagan they were going to do an internal review. Now, that's all we were told. Now, there's been no mention of any names whatsoever as doing an external review. To say that you constantly do internal reviews, that's not world shattering. Any decent manager worth his salt, is always doing an internal review of what he's got. In terms of an external review, I've been involved in organisations where we've called for an external review, and you get some very, very surprised results out of that, because people look at that. The people that look at from outside look at it with the way they look at things isn't coloured. It's not biased. Whereas
there's also a problem with that, Macca, because I'm involved in an area where there's often reviews in very particular areas, and we've had a lot of external reviewers come in who have absolutely no idea about the space that they're reviewing and what they provide, the amount of money it costs. Like KPMG, etc. They just have no idea of what they're doing, but we've had to get an external review. And sometimes it's a complete and utter waste of money for it to happen, and you have to spend so much time responding away from your actual job that needs to get done. So
yeah, but
I don't have this belief in reviews like Macca does. Because
I've also worked in an environment where that's happened, and you're right. External consultants, Nikki, can sometimes miss the mark completely because they're accountants and they don't know the industry. But we're talking about a football club, and there's enough people within the footy industry that would be capable of reviewing certain elements of that club. You don't need to bring in an external consultant unless you're actually reviewing finances. There are plenty of people in the football industry through various channels that are well placed to be able to conduct a considered and appropriate review. And I do agree with you, Nick. I've been involved in external consultants coming in and tearing a place apart and having absolutely NFI about what they're talking about because they're not part of the industry. But in this case, there's enough people around that could do it.
And the man in question is Brian Cunningham. Brian Cunningham has been not only a great footballer and a good football brain, he's also been in high executive positions.
Yep.
And he is being used. He was used in the trotting industry to do an external review of that. Again, I've seen the review that he did on because I race paces, so I know the industry. His review was excellent, and we had Crow-like managers who wouldn't implement it because it affected their own persons. They wanted to look after themselves, and they didn't implement the recommendations, and they're in trouble financially. But
anyway,
Brian Cunningham would have done a good review. But
I don't know how we got from contested possessions to.
I'm sorry, but
no. It's
Macca
fine.
having
It's
a go
fine.
at Burton, basically.
No, and rightly so.
I'm angry about the club. I'm angry about the club overall, Nicky. It is not just what we saw on the football field and what we saw the week before and the week before that. That is just an expression of what we've got behind the scenes, and that's what we get.
I think that, Macca, I think that's a fair call. I think you can have outliers in any season. Have a look at Geelong this weekend against Hawthorn, right? That's an outlier. That's not a trend. And, it's against a nemesis, and they always have good games and all the rest of it. So you could say that the Geelong game for us was an outlier because we never play well at Kardinia Park. You can certainly express concern about the Port Adelaide game, but then you can say, it's a showdown and form goes out the window. But this game against Essendon, against a team that was depleted, let's not forget, they didn't have a fucking ruckman, right?
I know.
Didn't have a ruckman. They had a couple of really good players out. They're below us on the table. We're fighting for a position in the top 8, let alone the top 4. We've come off a confidence-boosting win, albeit against a lowly team, but, we've been able to shake off the showdown loss, etc., etc. We're in front at half-time, controlling the match.
Very much controlling the match.
And we lose it convincingly. Essendon kicked 4 of the last 5 goals of the match. We lost it convincingly. Convincingly, we lost it. That to me. Sorry, go on.
10 of the last 13. 10 of the last 13 to be exact.
Yeah, but they kicked. Let me just have a look. I didn't actually realise it at the time, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on a minute, bloody Essendon have kicked the last half dozen goals or whatever. But basically, I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh dear.
No, basically, what I was going to say is that if this Essendon game was a litmus test for me, and it's no longer an outlier, it's no longer circumstantial. It's a trend. It's an absolute trend, and you're right, Macca. It's a reflection of what's going on at the club, in my view. That we have. There's no urgency, no passion. There's no mettle within the group at the moment. I don't think that they actually believe in what the coaching group are putting in front of them. I don't think they necessarily believe in each other. And I think the group is cooked from not only the admin and coaching staff, but also the players. I think they're cooked.
Yeah, just on the players. When you look at the on paper, you look at the team on paper, you think that's not a bad lineup. But as you know, it's one of the ingredients of the players. Then it's how you're using the structure, the game plan that they're trying to play, the roles they play within that game plan. And the one thing that we do, the 2 players that we have lost to other clubs that really hurt us, Dangerfield and Charlie Cameron, the ones that could provide that same dash that Essendon had into the forward lines. If we had those 2 players left, or their equivalents, it would be a different team, totally different team. We don't have that speed, that dash out of the centre.
No, we don't have a lot of things, Macca, but let's not forget that we have won games of football. We're not terrible, right? We've won games of football.
That's what I said. On paper, we've got good players.
Yeah. And so it makes you think, what else has gone on? I don't think our balance is right. I don't think our structure's right in the midfield. Okay. I think we lack a marking forward, like a real marking forward, and that hurts us in terms of our forward 50 entries and our ability to keep the ball in forward. But at the end of the day, I think when we were playing against Port, we looked like a team in that second half that had no idea how to turn the game around once it was lost. And
terrible.
And I think we're still that team. We're still that team that if Plan A doesn't work, it's not that we don't have other plans. It's just that the players don't. I don't think they believe in those other plans. They don't play with any belief anymore. Anyway, look, let's plough through the rest of these stats, and then we can have a bit more of a chat about it. Contested marks was even. Marks inside 50, surprisingly 15-9 our way. But as I mentioned, you want to have a look to see where those 15 marks were taken, both in terms of where on the field and also when in the course of the game. 50 clearances to 28 didn't help us at all. 35 to 39 rebound 50, so there wasn't that massive disparity that Pikey might have led you to believe. Metres gained, they were a little bit more. Turnovers, as I mentioned earlier, we won that stat quite convincingly. Tackles inside 50 was only 9 to 11, so it wasn't terrible, but 9's still not a high number. So, we won't bash on about the differentials anymore. Let's have a look at some individuals, shall we? Now, Brad, you would say he had a good game, and I guess you can't say that he didn't have a good game.
He had a really good. I was quite pleased with his first half.
Yes, exactly.
I thought that first half was so good. He seemed to have turned that corner. He was playing a lot better around our midfield. It was that second half. It was that lack of defensive run. There was so specifically a couple of their goals I can attribute specifically to either Brad or Atkins with their lack of wanting to put pressure around a contest on their player, giving them too much space. And then when they start to spread out, they just jog behind they're too far away.
Well, Brad Crouch
I don't think it's quite as simple as that, Nicky, but I thought Brad had a good game.
Brad Crouch did not
first half.
Brad Crouch did not have a contested possession from the 16-minute mark of the second quarter until the 24-minute mark of the third quarter, Macca. Not one contested possession. That's when the game is turning, right? Not one contested possession.
Well, he may not have been in a position to do that.
Well, he's playing in the midfield. He has to be in a position to do that.
He's on the field.
Brad Crouch didn't have one clearance from the 16.
I think every week we target Brad, and there are so many others out there who don't bloody contest at all and don't get the ball at all.
But he's our number one midfielder, Macca. What the hell do you want me to do? Well, he's our number one midfielder. No. Listen, look, we have got a lot of players that get very busy doing nothing at all, and Brad Crouch is one of them, right? So his KPIs are getting the ball and delivering it, right? That's what a midfielder does, yeah? So between halfway through the second quarter and the end of the third quarter, he didn't have a contested possession, he didn't have a clearance. And that's when the game turned. So who else do you want me to blame?
He's had 17 other good mates out on the ground with him.
But he's at the coalface. It's a midfielder's game. You know that, Macca. Without the midfielder working, the forwards don't get enough ball and the backs are under too much pressure. You know that.
Look, I'm not trying to defend Brad and say he played a perfect game, but I will say this. He at least got the ball 35 times. Compare that to some of the others.
And most of that 35 times, he handballed to Matt.
Exactly.
2 metres away from him.
Exactly, and it was noticeable.
He applied 7 tackles, which, again, is a lot more than our forwards did.
Yeah, well, he's around the bloody contest, Macca.
Yeah, Roddy O'Brien was around there as well.
He's a fucking ruckman, for God's sake. Come on.
No, he actually played very well once the ball hits the ground as well. No, he played 4 tackles. He's probably a poor example, but Paul Seidman, not a tackle into his name, I think, did he?
Well, Brad Crouch tackle stats. He had no tackles in the second quarter, and he had 1 tackle in the third quarter. That's when the game changed. So his tackles happened in the first quarter and the last quarter. So when the game changed, he had no tackles. He's had no contested possessions, he's had no clearances, and he's laid no tackles. What's he done for a quarter? Nothing. This is why we're looking for why the game turned, Macca, and this is why the game turned, because our premier midfielders didn't. And I'm not just harping on Brad. I'm going to go through the others, But Brad's
Okay.
the first cab off the rank. And I'm just telling you what's in front of me on the screen here.
Okay, but I understand what you're saying. But there was also there were a lot of company that didn't even do as good as he
I
did.
couldn't give a shit. I couldn't give a shit about what company he's in. The fact is that he did not perform. Matt Crouch didn't have a clearance until the 5-minute mark of the third quarter. He actually was our clearance machine in the third quarter with 4 clearances, right? So Matt Crouch got clearances in the third quarter. Matt Crouch also got contested possessions in the third quarter, right? He got, he got 4 contested possessions in the third quarter. So who are you going to blame, Matt or Brad?
Both of them in the 16
No.
mates.
I've just given you stats that are complete opposite, Matt. Macca.
Look, Fane, we'll never agree on Brad.
So are you just going to ignore stats, Macca? Are you just going to ignore stats?
He has bad patches the same as all the players do.
It was a whole fucking quarter, Macca, and it was the quarter that coincided with us losing the game.
And I'm not arguing against that particular fact.
You are. You're saying, a lot of other people play bad. Well, during that period, Matt didn't play bad.
I didn't say that.
He's their other cold-faced player. Matt didn't play bad. Only Brad during that period.
Well, what about Sloan? How did Sloan go in that period?
All right, so Sloaney during that period in the third quarter, another one didn't have a clearance in the third quarter, and had two contested possessions. So another one, he doesn't escape the blowtorch either. 2 contested possessions.
The team played shit in that period, and Brad was part of that team. I accept that.
It's not just that Brad is not Lockie Murphy, Macca. He's not a bit player, right? Brad is and Sloan. These blokes are integral to whether we win or lose. And you've got to remember that while all this is going on, right, Riley O'Brien is dominating the hitouts. Right?
Yes.
Dominating the hitouts. So in the third quarter, we were looks like about plus 10 in hitouts, right? So we dominated the hitouts. And yet our main 2 ball winners, Rory Sloane and Brad Crouch, can only get 1 clearance and 2 contested possessions between them for that whole quarter.
It's not good enough. I totally accept that.
I mean, you're gonna have to point the finger at someone, Macca. So if it's not Rory Sloane and Brad Crouch, who is it?
Well, it is them. They're part of it. But I just thought after half time there were so many of our team that you could actually finger and said that about.
But it starts with the midfield. Surely you know that. It starts with the midfield. Everything stems from the midfield. If we do not get the ball, then our forwards can't work and our defenders are under too much pressure. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with it.
And if our inside midfielders aren't getting the ball out, then how are our outside runners supposed to work?
I'm not going to argue with you on it. I just think we make a lot of Brad, and we...
he fucking deserves it. That's why, Macca. He deserves it.
All right.
Simple as that. Riley Knight's another one. Riley Knight did not have a contested possession from the 15-minute mark of the first quarter until the 20-minute mark of the third quarter. Not 1 contested possession. This is a bloke who's in the team because he's a hard nut.
How many contested possessions did the team have in that quarter thing?
Let me have a look. In the third quarter?
Well,
I'm looking at 74 to 106. Looks like 32.
It's very poor for a team, isn't it?
About 32. Well, no, not really. 32 times 4 is 120 contested possessions. How many contested possessions do you reckon we normally get?
I don't know, but who was getting them then? They must be in the back lines.
Well, maybe they were. I mean, Essendon had 152 contested possessions for the game. We had 141. So you divide 141 by 4. That's about 30-ish, 35, something like that, right? So we had 32 in a bad quarter. But in that bad quarter, even though we still had, an average number of contested possessions, our two main ball winners only got one between them.
And that is pathetic. There's no argument against that.
Yeah, but you're asking me. I'm telling you, I'm not biased for no reason. I'm biased because of what I see, and I'm lucky enough to have put together a stats tracker to be able to help me pinpoint who's doing what when, and yeah, I have that going when I watch a game of football, and I can see exactly what's happening. And Brad Crouch goes fucking missing and will not run and work when it gets too hard. Simple as that. And Rory Sloane, for the amount of money that he's on, should be able to shake a freaking tag from... Who was on him? Bloody...
Dylan Clark, first-year player.
A first-year player, exactly right, Mac. A first-year player playing against a veteran and a co-captain of our team, and he gets swallowed up. It's not good enough.
No, it is not good enough. I totally agree.
Like, we can sit here and no disrespect to you, Macca, I've listened to you bash on about Burton for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And I sit and listen to people bash on about Don Pike and, Matt Godden and Ben Hart, and I've done it myself, right? But the facts don't lie, that if you're out on a footy field and you're getting paid $600,000 a year to get the agate, and you're not getting the agate, then the blame surely sits with you, doesn't it? Because none of those other blokes are grabbing your jumper when you're out on the footy field, are they?
No.
Brett Burton is not scragging Brad Crouch when Brad Crouch is trying to run defensively, is he?
No,
so
but
ultimately, the player has to bear the responsibility.
Well, of course they do. But in the background, they can be trying to play an unplayable game plan.
Yeah, but you talk to me about... And it sounds like you and I are having an argument. We're really not. But it pisses me off a bit, Macca, because you talk to me about imbalance when I have a crack at Brad Crouch. You've spent 6 months, or probably 18 months, bagging Brett Burton. And yet
I won't stop till he goes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But you want me to let Brad Crouch off the hook?
No, you are totally entitled to your opinion about it, and you're.
It's not an opinion; it's fact.
I just finished by saying, and you're backing it up.
So you've got to, if you want balance, then you've got to show the same amount of balance. And when you're talking about how football is played these days, it's all about the midfield. And our two premier midfields did nothing for a quarter and a half. And as a consequence, we lost the game.
I am agreeing with you on that. But what I'm also saying is that some of the other players who were poor in that period were poor all game rather than having good periods.
Well, give me one.
What?
Give me a player.
Do you think that Eddie had a good game?
No, but he's playing forward pocket.
And he's relying on the midfield to get the ball to him.
Taylor Walker at centre-half forward. Did he have a good game?
Playing full forward.
No, he played centre-half forward.
Well, played centre-half forward then. He's playing forward. He's playing in the arc.
Did Lockie Murphy have a good game?
Nope. Shit game. Playing forward.
Rory Atkins, did he have a good game on the wing?
Nope.
On the ball?
Nope, absolutely not. Probably suffered for our lack of contested possession, but didn't go and get it enough himself.
Did Riley Knight have a good game?
Shouldn't have been in the team.
So, I mean... Anyhow.
And but most all of those you've actually...
Go on, Nikki. Nikki. You're going to say what I was going to say.
Yeah, most of the ones that you've named there are relying on the midfield getting the ball to them.
Not all of them, but yes.
Most of them are. Well, Knight's mostly playing up forward. He wasn't playing in the midfield. Only occasionally did he go in there, and I think that was only in the last quarter. Eddie's playing deep forward. Tex relies on the midfield to get it to him, even if he's playing full forward or centre-half forward, and he alternates between those two. Murphy's playing a small forward role. He's relying on either Tex getting it. Therefore, that's, again, on the midfield. The only midfielder you named is somebody we know shouldn't be in the team, should have been dropped a long time ago, and should be on the trade table at the end of the year, which is Rory Atkins.
Right. Let's move on from Brad, and I'll concede that you are right.
It's not about being right, Macca. It's about trying to work out what's going wrong. And I feel that what went wrong was our midfield stopped working in that third quarter. And by the time the game got completely out of our control. They kicked 4 goals, 2 in that third quarter, and we kicked 1 goal, 1. What was the inside 50 count, like 5-19 or something or other in that third quarter? We didn't even get it forward. I don't know how you expect Eddie Betts to have an influence on the game when we get it in the forward line 5 times in a quarter, right? Okay. And that's after having complete dominance in that stat up to half time. We were completely dominating the game up until half time. And then,
not quite up to half time. I thought we just eased off again, as we have been doing about the last 5-7 minutes of the quarter.
Well, you're being pedantic.
No, I'm not being pedantic. I'm raising that for a particular reason, because I reckon it's about the same mark we knock off in every bloody game.
Oh yeah, that's probably true. That's a fair point, because we do seem to tail off just leading into half time.
The other teams always get a couple of goals just before half time.
Yeah. Well, even Gold Coast were getting red time scores against us last week. Port killed us in red time in the showdown. I reckon most of their telling goals came in time, or in that last 5 minutes of the quarter, from memory. So it's definitely an issue. And even in this game, as you mentioned, Mac, leading into half time, they got a couple, and like I said earlier, they got the last 4 goals of the game.
And the other thing which we haven't really mentioned is the fact that we are the worst set shot team in the competition. We're now 18th for set shots, and the number of times we could have stitched games up before half time and still had a bad second half and won is quite a few, because we missed like anything up to half a dozen gimmies from absolute set shots that every AFL player should kick.
Tell me this, Macca. If we were 10-7 to 5-3, do you think we would have won?
If we played the same way as we played the second half.
If the game panned out the same way, 10 goals, 7, I don't think it would have made a scrap of difference. Yes, it puts more scoreboard pressure on Essendon, but they won going away. They won very 21 goals and kicked the last 4 goals of the game. Yes, it would help if we could kick bloody straight, and there's some real culprits. I don't know what's happened at Tex Walker's kicking, but he's not the only culprit. Tommy Lynch missed one that he shouldn't have missed. Lockie Murphy doesn't seem to be able to kick straight. Eddie Betts doesn't seem to be able to kick straight half the time. I don't know.
But when we were 30 points up, we should have really been up about 45, 50 points at that stage.
Well, I wouldn't say 50, probably 40, 45.
Well, I think we missed 3 or 4 very, very easy gimme goals. And,
I don't think it would have been beyond. And you can't even make that assumption, because a kick a goal instead of a point, the whole game changes, because it goes back to the middle. So,
while I understand that, we do make our job harder.
Oh, no doubt about it. But I don't think it's. I don't think it's the difference between us making finals and not. Look, special mention to Riley O'Brien. I thought he did really well. 12 kicks, 15 handballs for 27, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 39 hit-outs, 7 clearances, 17 contested possessions. Our team high contested possessions. Macca.
Yep, and the only critical factor in Riley O'Brien's game, which was a magnificent game, by the way, was the fact probably 2 to 3 times, maybe 4 times, he actually knocked a player who was in a better position, one of our players, who was in a better position to get the ball out the way, trying to get it, and in the process knocked the ball to the opposition.
Well, when your premier midfielders are standing around having a cup of tea, you're not going to knock him, are you, for going and getting the yakka?
No, look, it was with Riley O'Brien. It is definitely a case of see ball, get ball, and if everybody was like that, you wouldn't lose a game. But unfortunately, they did rebound on us about 2 or 3 times. That's my only knock on his whole game. I thought he played an excellent game.
Well, you want to knock him, and yet you want Brad Crouch.
I'm not. No, hang on.
70% disposal efficiency.
Earlier.
He had 6 stoppage clearances. He had 5 score involvements, only 3 turnovers, 6 intercept possessions. It was just a monster, I thought.
Absolute monster of a game.
And so it should have been, Nick?
Magnificent.
Yeah, when we got the little announcement that he'd signed on for 2 extra years before the game, you think, okay, for those who talk about whether you're mentally weak or strong, for a lot of them, okay, I've got that job security, I know I've got the job, but he just is continually putting that pressure on to say, I am now the ruckman for this team. Jacobs is not going to get a look in whilst he's playing like that, and he shouldn't.
And between us, we have criticised other players in the team, and there is nobody else in the team that tries harder than this bloke. Nobody.
Nope.
And if everybody had the same heart and willingness to chase the footy as this bloke did, as I said, even when at the expense of sometimes knocking his teammates over, we'd never get beaten. This guy is what he's putting in at the moment is it's about 2 to 3 times any other teammate of his. He's just a 100%er.
Yeah, can't fault him. I thought Brodie Smith was pretty good. He sort of played forward
until he changed his number.
Yeah, well,
I missed 26 in the second half. Although it was kind of hilarious because I think one of the first times, because I'm watching the warm up and I'm going, there's a 26 out there. Who's out? And I'm trying to count everybody. And by that time, Brodie had turned around to face me, and so I'm like, no, but Brodie's there, and everybody else. And once the game started, is going, he's actually got 26 on.
I wonder whether it was a ploy to shake a tag or something.
I reckon it was.
Because they would have seen 26 and gone, we're not tagging Richard Douglas.
But the funniest thing is, I think when he went to his first possession, he went to go get it and he fell over. I'm like, oh my God, it's not Dougie that falls over all the time, it's the number.
Yeah, it must be a heavier amount of fabric or something. But I thought Brodie was pretty good. He had 31 touches, 7 marks, 3 goals, 4 tackles, 6 inside 50s, 6 clearances. He went at 77% disposal efficiency, 12 contested possessions, so second only to Riley O'Brien. He had 8 score involvements and gained 600 metres. Mackie, you can't ask much more than that from the bloke who hasn't played midfield for his whole career, even though everyone's been jumping up and down saying get him in the midfield. Including
Brodie. He's wanted to be a midfielder ever since he's been in the A grade. And apparently he's pestered every coach that he's had, please play me in the midfield.
But why should he have to fucking pester a coach?
Oh, because they're stupid. I mean, and seriously.
My God.
You saw what happened when he was given the opportunity. And I reckon it's possibly very close to the best game that Brodie's played, and in terms of his impact upon a game, because he still had kicked a hell of a lot of gained a lot of metres, but he's dash and he's actually got pace and he can kick a very long ball. I really loved his game.
Well, and the thing I like about Brodie's game is that his stats line was pretty consistent for most of the game.
Yeah.
He didn't drop off at many stages. His numbers stayed pretty consistent through the course of the game. In fact, he was... what did he get in the third quarter? He got 6 contested possessions in that third quarter, so he's certainly not one to shy away from it when others perhaps were. So really good game from Brodie, I thought.
Massive tick, and if it wasn't for Riley O'Brien's lion-hearted effort, he would have been the BOG, but I think Riley just pipped him.
What do you think, Nick?
No, agreeing with what you say, that was one of the best games I've seen from Brodie. And whether he was playing up forward or whether he was playing in the midfield, we've all kind of talked about Millerer doing that role, and I think he's that contrast between the pair of them. So who's actually the more natural at it? And I think it's Brodie.
Yeah, I agree with him.
I'm going to make a call and say that I don't think Wayne Miller is a midfielder.
He's not a natural midfielder.
He gets a bit lost.
Yeah, I think...
Well, Andrew McLeod ended up on a half-back flank and became one of the best players in the comp from that particular position, just setting us up time after time. And I think that's where Miller will shine his best.
I agree with you, Mac. I don't think there's anything that says Wayne has to be a midfielder in order to fulfil his potential. I think you play players where they're best suited. And I think Wayne is fantastic with the ball coming at him. He's able to intercept and counter with speed and agility and be really damaging by foot. I think he could possibly be a wingman, but I don't think he's in the centre rotations. And I would love to see them and I think he can have cameos up forward as well, but I don't think he's a natural midfielder. It's certainly not from what I'm seeing now. He may well develop in the future, I don't know, but I'd have him off half-back every day of the week.
Yeah, I'd have a half-back or wing, then perhaps in the one game playing both, just interchangeable. I think, as you said, he plays so well when he sees the ball coming at him, and once he's got hold of it, the ability to get out of tight places and then use the ball, I think coming off half-back and wing gives him that opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and when you consider we got D-Mac running off half-back, and no disrespect to D-Mac because I thought he was serviceable, did what you expect David McKay to do, but we look far better with a Wayne Miller playing in that sort of, defensive outlet role. And I know at the moment we're trying to inject some pace into our midfield, but I think it's more an indictment on the fact that we're not choosing the right players. I mean, again...
Correct.
Play Chase Jones. He's a relatively quick lad. Play Jordan Galuch. He's relatively quick. These are guys...
Yeah.
We draft midfielders and then we refuse to play them in the midfield. And then we try to turn everyone else into a bloody midfielder. Play them where they are naturally good.
I think that's a very logical statement, and that's what should happen.
Yeah, we've when you look at our team, we've got it like even Luke Brown was a midfielder as a junior, if I remember rightly, wasn't he, Nick?
Yeah, he was.
Tell you what, he when he matched strides with Tippin and Woody, and actually then beat him. Yeah, that really made the commentators sit up. I know, but the commentators they were almost gasping at how quick he was.
Yeah. The thing, I reckon half the problem with Luke Brown's name is that he's got 2 single-syllable words to his name, and one of them is Brown, right? So he's the most unassuming bloke you would ever meet. He plays unassuming football. It seems like a relatively quiet... I mean, we've had him interview on the CrowCast, and he's a mild-mannered sort of a lad. And I reckon as a consequence, they just stick him in the back pocket and be done with it. But, Jesus, I reckon I wonder whether they've ever considered running him through the midfield.
He actually is an excellent shot for goal. Excellent shot for goal. I can't remember him missing when he's had a set shot for goal.
Oh, he's missed, I think, one or so. But a couple of years ago, there was one of those like question and answer things they do with players through every team. And for the Adelaide, the question was, if there had to be a kick after the siren on the 50, who would you trust in your team to take it? And even though we had Tex, and it was the time that Tex was actually playing really well, pretty much every single player in our squad nominated Luke Brown for that role. And their nickname for him is actually Silence.
Yeah.
And they do that because that's what he does to small forwards.
But
he silences them.
Our back pocket had 24 touches, 18 and 6. He took 5 marks, laid a tackle, 7 rebound 50s, 2 inside 50s. He went at 91% disposal efficiency. He had 4 score involvements, 380 metres gained, and 10 intercept possessions. And I bet you no one put him in the best players.
You made an excellent point there, Finn, because I was aware that he played an excellent game, but I bet you that 90% of our supporters, even at the game, wouldn't have recognised that he had played that well.
No. Tip Woody kicked 1 goal, had 8 kicks, was not influential.
No.
And this is a guy who's been on fire. Lukey Brown absolutely flogged him. And, his sort of reliability and his sneaky pace and his composure, because he's a very composed player.
Yeah, terrific composure.
And the fact, again, he played his juniors as a midfielder. What the hell is he doing in the back pocket?
It'd be interesting trying him on the ball, see how he goes. I mean, you'd certainly be missing a very good player down back.
Well, I'll tell you who you put down back, Riley Knight.
No. Next year when Duday's back.
Oh, well, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about it right now. Anyway, look, disappointing players. Sloan we've talked about. Atkins, I just wasn't impressed with his game. I just felt it was another nothing game. I mean, he had 13 kicks, 19, took 7 marks. It just didn't really influence the contest at important times. I felt Wayne Miller was a bit the same, faded in and out of the game and wasn't really sighted when the whips were cracking.
Not enough. No, not enough.
Huey Greenwood continues to be a bit enigmatic. Don't know what to make of Huey. I know, Nick, you were at the game, about 90% up forward, Huey?
Yeah, mostly up forward.
Yeah. I don't mind it.
There was a couple of times in the midfield, he was placed in the midfield and we were starting to get the ball in and it was like, can I actually have 2 of him? Because we needed him up forward to provide that extra, the extra. So we were trying some different looks through that midfield. At least we were trying to do some changes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still not quite working.
Yeah.
Nicky, any truth to the rumours we're trying to trade him?
Well, with the output we're getting from him, and we know he's on very good coin, and other clubs are offering quite good coin, I would hate to see him go because I think he is quite a special player, but he's come to the game, I think, a little too late, unfortunately, and the changeover from a basketball fitness to AFL fitness is what's doing him in, unfortunately.
So why wouldn't you play him as a permanent forward?
I would.
Because he can obviously take a mark. He can apply some defensive pressure. Because I think you're right. I think he's never going to quite have the wheels or the capacity to run a full game out in the midfield. And it's a shame because he's fantastic inside. But he also plays very tall, and I think he's got some value as a forward. But I don't know whether he's got some value as a forward with us.
Yeah, I think long term that if we want to be able to play Chase Jones and McHenry and a lot of other young boys, we can't afford to keep all these old guys.
No.
When I say old guys, the guys that haven't got a lot of years left in them, but while they've got a bit of currency, it's time to move them on. And there is a bit of a rumour that might happen.
Oh, there's a big rumour. And look, we've got 2 blokes in this position because we've got 2 mature ages in Greenwood and Keith, and they both know that they're negotiating their biggest contract of their career at the moment.
Yes.
And on balance, one's having an All-Australian year and the other one's just floating about. So if you're the Crows, you're going to put your eggs in the Alex Keith basket at the moment, probably 100%. At the expense of Hugh. And when you have a look at our issues in the midfield and our imbalance, then it makes even more sense to make some room in that space for some different personnel. So, unfortunately, I think everyone loves Huey Greenwood and no one, from an emotional perspective, wants to see him go. But I think we can all agree that it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Look, the other one, Tommy Lynch, I mentioned briefly before, he had 24 touches, but he's another one that is just so bloody rusty when first came back from a spell, and it told in the second half.
Yeah, really good in the first half. He was getting, I think, there was a little bit of a test. He was on the bench for quite a bit in that third.
Yeah, I saw that.
But I think it was also, we were kind of peppering that ball up forward and he was trying to get on and it wasn't quite working. But yeah, he did. It was that fade out in the second half, which shows because of he hasn't been able to do that running, but we've missed him.
Well, it was his disposal efficiency, Nick. 58.3 for the match, and as I said, he had 12 disposals, only 5 effective in the second half, and 4 direct turnovers that led to scores for Essendon. So that was really costly. And as much as we know that Lynchy is an important part of our game plan in terms of being a conduit, again, remember the time when the Crows would never ever pick a player straight back into the ones after an injury? We would always run them through the twos. Do you remember those days? Those days are gone now, because we quite often like blokes like Jenkins, Lynch, a couple of others, straight back into the team. And those are blokes that are notoriously slow after a spell.
Although, having said that, though, Fane, I think a lot of clubs do that these days. There's some that are more conservative, and I think that's probably the right way to go. But I have noticed a lot of teams will pick players that have been out 5 or 6 weeks and put them straight in. And generally, they go no good, and often they re-injure themselves. So there is a bit of merit in putting him back in the twos, isn't there?
Yeah, well, just to give him a run. I mean, because the trouble is, Lynchy looked a bit proppy. As you said, Nick, he copped a bit of a knock just before half-time or something, and looked a little bit sluggish there for a while. But you're taking a big risk. Do you put a fit guy in there to play that role, or do you play a bloke in there that's you're not quite sure whether he's going to run out the game? I don't know. Anyway, look, we've been crapping on for ages, and I knew this was going to be a long wrap, but we're probably putting people to sleep now.
Well, they've been active in the chat, so...
Yeah, they have, and quite rightly so.
Yeah. Really disappointing, obviously, but we've always called it as we see it here at the CrowCast, haven't we, lady and gentlemen? So we don't pull any punches with the CrowCast.
And we do love our club, and we want them to succeed, and we know that there's people within the club that they want to succeed just as much as we do.
Yep.
But we have to vent our frustrations and our anger. But I think what we do, we try and discuss and look at ways of going, okay, what's going wrong and how can we fix it? And what are the possible ways that could be fixed? And that's all we're trying to do, trying to get some answers ourselves, and so that we can see a way forward.
Yeah, I think that's fair and reasonable, Nikki. That's what we're trying to do. We do love our club, and it's horrible sitting down and watching the capitulation that's occurred over the last over the last month or so, because, and I'm sure the players must realise this. There are some players in that team that are on their last legs in terms of opportunities to play finals football and perhaps contend for a flag. And you just wonder whether some of these senior blokes are starting to lose that belief that they're ever going to make it, and whether that's the point, Macca, where you got to move those blokes on.
Yeah, and I think when you're in that situation and you identify, you should move them on. Yep. Because you're only holding up the young somebody else's progress and ability to fill that position.
That's right. All right, well, look, how about we leave it there? We've got massive Tuesday Night Live coming up again this Tuesday. It's been a big rap show. We thank everyone for participating on Spreaker and also on Facebook chat. Thanks to our sponsors, Ryan at Smith Partners Real Estate. If you have any real estate needs, buying, selling or renting, visit Ryan at Smith Partners up there at Golden Grove. Down to Earth Electrical for all your electrical, air conditioning and data needs. If you've got any geeky needs for advice, go and see Scorpus's YouTube channel, Hardware Unboxed. And a massive thank you to everyone who supports us on Patreon. If you want to support us on Patreon, go to patreon.com/AFL CrowCast or click the Patreon button on the AFLCrowcast.com website. Epic rap show. Nikki and Macca, well done.
Thank you.
We bring it.
Well done. We did bring it. Thanks to everyone, as I said on the chat. We'll see you on Tuesday night for Tuesday Night Live. Good night.
Yeah,
night all.